What if I told you there was a time when America feared it had already lost the skies? Imagine it. The early 1970s, at the height of the Cold War. Soviet jets were flying higher, faster, and farther than anything the West could match. Pilots whispered that the Russians had built a monster that could outrun missiles and touch the edge of space. The world called it the MiG-25 Foxbat. But the question that haunted every airman in America was simple. Could we ever catch it? The answer would come from one machine, the F-15 Eagle. By the end of the 1960s, the Cold War wasn't just about nuclear bombs or ideology. It was about who ruled the sky. When Israeli radar operators spotted blips moving at altitudes above 78,000 feet and speeds beyond Mach 2.8, they realized something extraordinary. These weren't American aircraft. They were Soviet intruders, sleek silver jets known as MiG-25 Foxbats. And they weren't just fast. They were untouchable. At that moment, panic rippled through Western air forces. Intelligence officers studied grainy photos showing enormous air intakes and engines the size of truck trailers. The numbers didn't lie. The MiG-25 could climb higher and accelerate faster than anything the U.S. possessed. In Washington, one general put it bluntly, "If that thing can fight as well as it flies, we're in trouble." The challenge ignited a new American project, codenamed FX, later christened the F-15 Eagle. The task given to McDonnell Douglas engineers was bold yet terrifyingly simple. Build a fighter that can never lose an air battle. No compromise, no excuses. On December 23, 1969, the U.S. Air Force awarded McDonnell Douglas a $1.1 billion contract, the equivalent of more than $10 billion today, to design and produce just 20 prototypes. That's $500 million per jet in modern terms. Critics in Congress gasped at the price tag. But what America got in return was something no money could measure: the rebirth of air superiority. The engineers didn't want a rocket like the MiG-25. They wanted a brawler, a jet that could dance through the air, trade energy like a boxer swapping blows, and still come out on top. It would need massive engines, agile wings, and a brain guided by one revolutionary idea. That idea came from a man named John Boyd, a fiery Air Force pilot who saw combat not as art, but as math. In 1962, while studying engineering at Georgia Tech, Boyd began exploring a theory he called energy maneuverability, EM, a mathematical model that quantified how aircraft could trade speed, altitude, and turn rate during combat. With the help of mathematician Thomas Christie, Boyd proved what pilots had only felt in their bones: that agility and sustained energy, not raw speed, decided who lived and who died in a dogfight. By 1964, their research, once ridiculed as academic nonsense, was declassified and recognized as groundbreaking. For the first time, designers could calculate how every ounce of weight, every degree of wing angle, and every pound of thrust affected performance. The Air Force realized Boyd's math could do something a radar or missile could: predict victory. And so the F-15 was born directly from those equations. Every rivet, every curve of its wing, every contour of its airframe existed because the numbers said it would win. When the first blueprints of the F-15 were laid out, the specifications were audacious. Twin Pratt & Whitney F-100 engines, each producing 22,000 pounds of thrust, later boosted to 23,930 pounds. a combined 47,060 plus tons of thrust, giving the jet more power than it weighed. A top speed around Mach 2.5, not quite the MiG-25's Mach 3, but far more sustainable. A service ceiling of 65,000 feet, a length of 63 foot 9 in, and a wingspan of 42 foot 9 in. It became the first American fighter with a thrust-to-weight ratio greater than 1.1. In other words, the F-15 could accelerate while climbing straight up, something no previous U.S. aircraft could do. But it wasn't just about power. Engineers calculated that chasing Mach 3 speeds would require 3,000 pounds more fuel and heavier structure, crippling agility. So, they deliberately capped the speed and poured every ounce of saved weight into maneuverability and endurance. It was a strategic decision. While the Foxbat was a drag racer, the Eagle would be a prize fighter. Still, the skeptics were loud. When the Air Force announced the F-15's speed and ceiling targets, journalists mocked the project. How can this be air superiority, they asked, when the Soviets fly higher and faster? Congress questioned the enormous cost. Some even demanded cancellation, arguing the jet was inferior to the Foxbat. But McDonnell Douglas test pilots and Air Force tacticians had the data. They explained that speed wasn't everything. They showed charts comparing wing loading and thrust-to-weight ratios, proving the F-15 could outturn, outclimb, and outfight the MiG-25 at combat altitudes. As one engineer quipped, "The Foxbat is a rocket with wings. The Eagle is a sword with afterburners." The math didn't lie. The Eagle might not reach space, but it would rule the battle space. In June 1972, the first F-15 rolled out of McDonnell Douglas's plant in St. Louis, painted in shimmering air superiority blue. It was the physical embodiment of America's comeback, sleek, muscular, and unrelenting. Just a month later, the jet took its maiden flight, stunning observers with its effortless climb and acceleration. By the next year, 1973, the U.S. had withdrawn from Vietnam, a wound that had shaken national confidence. The Soviets seemed unstoppable. They had launched the first satellite, the first man and woman into space, and were exporting communist influence across Asia and Africa. For many Americans, the F-15 wasn't just a fighter. It was redemption in metal form. It symbolized that the United States could still innovate, outthink, and outfly any enemy on Earth. But there was still one shadow looming: the MiG-25's world records. In 1973, the Soviets took their Foxbat and stripped it down, removing all weapons, armor, and systems to create a record-breaking prototype. Then, in front of international observers, pilot Boris Orlov climbed past 65,000 feet in 2 minutes 49.8 seconds. A few hours later, Pyotr Ostapenko went even higher, 85,000 feet in 3 minutes 12.6 seconds. Those numbers shook the aviation world. Newspapers called it the Soviet space fighter. To the average American, it looked like the Foxbat had rendered the Eagle obsolete before it even entered service. Inside the Pentagon, debates turned frantic. Could the new F-15 really compete with something that could almost leave the atmosphere? The truth, hidden behind layers of secrecy, was that the MiG-25 was not the super fighter it appeared to be. Its engines, when pushed to Mach 3, would literally melt from heat stress. Its giant wings were built from nickel-steel alloy, making it fast but heavy, sluggish, and unable to turn tightly. The Eagle's designers knew it. They didn't need to beat the Foxbat at speed. They needed to humiliate it where it mattered most: agility, precision, and climb. And so the U.S. Air Force came up with a plan. If the Soviets wanted to brag about speed, America would break their records in the one metric that truly measured power: time to climb. By late 1974, a small group of engineers at McDonnell Douglas and the Air Force stripped one pre-production F-15A, the 19th built, down to its bones. They removed 1,800 pounds of unnecessary weight, radar, guns, wiring, even the paint, saving 50 pounds of falsum. They reinforced the oxygen systems and fitted special gear so pilots could wear full-pressure suits, similar to those used by U-2 and SR-71 crews. To maximize thrust, both Pratt and Whitney F-100 engines were tuned to produce nearly 24,000 pounds each, raising the total output beyond 47,800 pounds. That gave the aircraft a thrust-to-weight ratio of 1.51, meaning it could climb vertically and still accelerate. The jet was so light and raw that it needed a steel cable to hold it down before takeoff. Once the pilot engaged full afterburner, an explosive bolt released the tether, and the Streak Eagle leapt from 0 to 170 mph in under 3 seconds, faster than a Formula One car leaving the grid. And just to mark its purpose, the team painted 2 words across its nose: Streak Eagle. In January 1975, under freezing North Dakota skies, the stage was set. Observers from the Fédération Aéronautique Internationale, FAI, arrived to certify the flights. Pilots Major Dave Peterson and Major Roger Smith, guided by McDonnell Douglas test legend Charles Pete Garrison, would push the Eagle to the edge of physics. Their mission wasn't combat. It was pride. They would climb higher, faster, and harder than any Soviet aircraft ever had. No missiles, no guns, just raw American engineering against Soviet propaganda. The world was about to witness whether the F-15 could truly soar past the myth of the Foxbat. And when the Streak Eagle's engines ignited and the earth trembled beneath it, America was ready to reclaim the sky. The first attempt began on January 16, 1975. The frozen North Dakota air burned white as the Streak Eagle thundered down the runway. Flames shot from its twin afterburners, the roar shaking snow from the hangars. At the controls, Major Dave Peterson felt the jet's raw strength press him into the seat. Seconds after takeoff, the Eagle banked hard, nosed upward, and shot vertically into the clouds. In less than 2 minutes, it sliced through 12,000 meters, eclipsing the MiG's early climb times. It wasn't just a test flight, it was a message. The United States had returned to the pinnacle of aviation. Over the next 10 days, the team flew repeatedly, sometimes 2 or 3 runs in a morning, each more precise than the last. The Streak Eagle was so powerful that on several occasions, pilots had to abort the climb because the jet accelerated faster than they could retract the landing gear without tearing it apart. The records tumbled one after another: 3,000, 6,000, 9,000, 12,000, 15,000, 20,000, 25,000 meters. Every flight rewrote the book on what man and machine could do together. Then came the most dangerous challenge of all: 30,000 meters, or 98,425 feet, higher than most spy planes could survive. This was more than competition. It was a physics problem. At that altitude, the air was so thin that oxygen boiled from exposed eyes and saliva. Engines risked overheating, starving, or shutting down entirely. On February 1, 1975, Major Roger Smith took the controls for the final record attempt. He lined up on the frozen runway, throttles forward, engines screaming at full afterburner. In a blur, the F-15 leapt from 0 to 170 mph in under 3 seconds, faster than a race car. At 492 mph, Smith pulled into a tight Immelman turn, flipping the jet inverted, then rolling upright again as the altimeter spun like a clock in overdrive. At 36,000 feet, he hit Mach 1.5. At 60,000 feet, Mach 2.2. The sky darkened from cobalt blue to ink black. As he crossed 62,000 feet, he breached the Armstrong line, where unprotected human blood would boil. And then, with both engines straining, temperatures spiking, Smith did something that made every observer tense. He shut them down. It was part of the plan. The air had become too thin to cool the turbines. For a few seconds, the world's most powerful jet became a silent glider suspended at the edge of space. The altimeter rolled past 98,000 feet. At 3 minutes and 27.799 seconds, Smith had done it. The fastest climb to 30,000 meters in history, smashing the MiG-25's record by over 36 seconds. When the F-15 nosed back down in a controlled dive, coasting through 55,000 feet before relighting its engines, the crowd below erupted. America had not only matched the Soviets, it had surpassed them, without firing a single shot. By the end of that bitter winter, the Streak Eagle had set 8 official world records recognized by the Fédération Aéronautique Internationale, FAI. 3,000 meters, 6,000 meters, 9,000 meters, 12,000 meters, 15,000 meters, 20,000 meters, 25,000 meters, 30,000 meters. Each climb was verified, documented, and broadcast around the world. Newspapers from Paris to Tokyo splashed the headlines, "America reclaims the sky." For a nation still haunted by Vietnam and shaken by inflation, this victory meant something profound. It wasn't just technical, it was psychological. It told the world that the United States could still lead, still innovate, still dominate the air when it mattered most. And for the pilots who flew it, the message was even simpler. The Eagle had landed, at the top. Exactly 1 year later, on January 9, 1976, the F-15 officially entered service with the U.S. Air Force. Its arrival marked a new doctrine. Air superiority was not negotiable. The Eagle's design philosophy was clear: no compromises. 2 massive engines, a wide delta-shaped wing for agility, advanced radar, and lethal precision weapons. It could fight its way into a battlefield, dominate the airspace, and protect bombers and troops below, all at once. But what truly set it apart was its perfect combat record. In 1979, Israeli pilots flying F-15s engaged Syrian MiGs over Lebanon. One of those encounters pitted an F-15 against the very aircraft it was built to defeat, the MiG-25. It wasn't even close. The Eagle locked on using its AM-7 Sparrow missile and fired. The Soviet jet, designed for speed but not for agility, couldn't outturn or evade. 1 missile, 1 kill. In the decades that followed, the numbers only grew more astonishing. The F-15 scored over 104 confirmed air-to-air victories without a single loss in combat, a streak unmatched by any other fighter in history. Meanwhile, the once-feared MiG-25 faded into the shadows. Western engineers eventually learned that much of its mystique had been built on illusion. When a Soviet pilot defected to Japan in 1976 with his MiG-25, American analysts were shocked by what they found. Crude rivets and welding seams. Heavy nickel-steel construction instead of lightweight alloys. Analog dials where they expected cutting-edge electronics. Engines that could only maintain Mach 3 for a few minutes before melting their turbine blades. The Foxbat wasn't a dogfighter. It was a high-speed interceptor, built to chase bombers, not duel with agile jets like the F-15. The myth collapsed overnight. By contrast, the Eagle proved to be the complete package: fast, strong, maneuverable, adaptable, and above all, reliable. Half a century later, the legend still soars. From the deserts of Iraq to the skies of the Pacific, the F-15 has remained America's guardian angel in the air. Its latest variant, the F-15EX Eagle II, brings digital flight systems, radar-absorbing coatings, and the ability to carry 22 air-to-air missiles at once. But beneath the modern avionics and touchscreen cockpits, the same soul beats. The soul that once roared across the frozen sky in 1975, proving that belief and brilliance could break any limit. Even today, the Eagle is still feared. It remains one of the few aircraft that can accelerate vertically, a living monument to the fusion of math, metal, and human will. As one retired colonel once said, "The F-15 doesn't fly, it dominates." The story of the Streak Eagle is more than aviation history. It's the story of a nation refusing to be outdone. The Cold War was fought with rockets and propaganda, but in those 17 days of winter, it was won, at least symbolically, by a handful of men and one machine. The Eagle's climb was America's answer to the question no one dared ask aloud: had we fallen behind? And its response echoed across the decades: not anymore. That's why even in the age of stealth bombers and AI-driven drones, the F-15 remains revered. It taught engineers that true power isn't about chasing speed, it's about mastering balance. It taught the world that precision can defeat panic, and that sometimes the greatest victories are measured not in kills or wars, but in the silence after a jet breaks the clouds, and history itself. When Major Smith climbed to 98,425 feet, he didn't just set a record. He restored faith. Faith in American innovation. Faith in the people who build, fly, and fight. Faith that when the world doubts you, you climb higher. Every pilot who ever flew the F-15 carries that legacy. They say the controls feel alive, responsive, smooth, like the aircraft knows what you want before you do. It's not a coincidence. Boyd's energy maneuverability theory still governs how fighters are designed today, from the F-22 Raptor to the F-35 Lightning II. And yet, none of them would exist without the trail the Streak Eagle blazed through the stratosphere 50 years ago. As America moves into an era of drones, hypersonic weapons, and AI-guided warfare, the Eagle stands as a reminder of something timeless: the courage to challenge the impossible. Because in the end, technology is only as good as the hands that fly it, and the will that fuels it. When historians look back, they may see the Streak Eagle as a relic, a piece of Cold War theater. But to those who watched it climb, it was much more. It was a promise that no matter how fierce the competition, no matter how high the bar, America would always find a way to reach it, and then go higher still. 50 years on, its records still stand, and maybe, just maybe, that's the point. Not that the F-15 was unbeatable, but that it showed the world what happens when ambition meets engineering and pride meets purpose. Even today, when its afterburners light and the ground shakes, it feels like the sky itself salutes. If you felt the fire of that story, the roar of engines, the pride of victory, then hit that like button and subscribe for more tales of American air power. Tell us in the comments, which aircraft should we cover next? The stealthy F-22 Raptor, the unstoppable A-10 Warthog, or the futuristic B-21 Raider? Your voice shapes the next mission. Because every jet has a story, And every story reminds us why the sky will always belong to those who dare to climb. Until next time, keep your eyes on the horizon and your spirit flying high.